Hey, what's going on? I want to welcome you guys back to another episode of the AWM NFL Podcast. My name is Riccardo Stewart, and I have the pleasure of being your host. And I'm joined, as usual, with my good friends, Zach Miller, Sam Acho, and Jeff Locke. Guys, we are in that point of the season for NFL where it's the best. I mean, like in the major sports, you think October is the best for baseball because that's the playoffs for the World Series. In basketball, it's June because you get into the NBA Finals. And for football, it's really that second to third week of January all the way through February for the Super Bowl, which is where we're at. And so I want to just talk about the playoffs and not even so much what's happening on the field, but some of the things that goes on out the field. And so I'm going to start first just in a playoff experience. I mean, this is the vantage point I get with talking to you guys is you guys have all played in the NFL and you have experience, and that matters a lot. So Sam, what did it mean for you going into your first ever playoff game?
Well, my first ever playoff game was everything. I remember being a rookie and playing in the preseason and saying, man, this is awesome. And a lot of the vets would say, hey, Sam, just wait until the regular season. It's different. But okay, great. I got to the regular season and it was in fact different. And I remember finishing my first regular season. We didn't make the playoffs. And a lot of the vets would say, hey, man, just wait until you make the playoffs. It's different. And it was in fact different. I think it was my fourth year in the NFL with Arizona Cardinals. And I'd gone through some injuries, been through life stuff. Well, all of a sudden we ended up making the playoffs, ended up playing the Carolina Panthers and Cam Newton. And for me, the experience was awesome, not only because we got playoff checks, so that was the whole thing, but also it was awesome because I got a chance to peak at the right time. As a younger player, you don't always think about the postseason and your body and how to like really play at your best at the end of the season. But I had learned after my first year and second year, third year, through veterans, through watching film, through asking guys questions. So I had one of my best games towards the end of the season, a season in which I was recovering from an injury, a season in which I was had some confidence issues. I was up and I was down. Got a chance to have a sack fumble on Cam Newton, helped change the game for our team. Ended up losing that game. I think we're on our third or fourth string quarterback. But the experience was the experience of a lifetime.
That's good. We always hear from defensive guys, or we're going to hear from an offensive guy. I feel like the playoffs so often, in these times of the games, it comes down to one or two plays, and eventually it's a time for the kicker to do some things. So like we don't always hear the perspective from a kicker. So we have one, Jeff Locke. What is the preparation going into a playoff game for a kicker? Is it different than the regular season? I'm sure you might not try to make it any different, but it has to be. I'd love to get your thoughts.
Yeah, so I only had one playoff game, and it didn't go so well. You can all look it up. One of the top 5 coldest games in NFL history. And I didn't prep well for it. I'll tell you that. But I've learned a lot since that experience. And what I should have done was prepare for it just like any other game, even though it was going to be negative 20 degrees. That was my mistake. So the kicker punter, the biggest thing you got to do is just treat it like it's another game.
I should have done some history. Sorry for bringing out that moment. I feel like I did the same. I think I did the same thing with Zach last year in talking about Super Bowl losses and wins, but I'm a great host.
Let's move to Zach. His answer is going to be great.
Okay, so Zach, I mean, let's go. I mean, Zach's smiling because he's like, I played in lots of games. I played in 2 Super Bowls. So Zach, I'd love to hear your perspective as someone who's played through a lot of games. Does the preparation change as you get older, as you become more of a vet where this is not your first playoff game, this is not your second playoff game, this is your fourth or fifth, or it's your second Super Bowl?
Yeah, I would say experience definitely helps in the playoffs. Pete Carroll always preached like play every game like it's a championship game. So when we got to playoffs, we tried as best we could not to let the hype get to us. But you realize the intensity is different in the playoffs. You have so many extreme competitors in the NFL. Everyone wants to win. There are some dogs out there. So you have to match that intensity or you'll get sent home quick. And so it took me till year 6 to make the playoffs. So when I finally got there, I couldn't have been more jacked up to just try and go win. And, we almost made it to the NFC Championship my first time in the playoffs. We end up going to the Super Bowl and winning it the next year in the playoffs and then lose the Super Bowl that third year. So I appreciated because of what I went through with the Raiders of like not making the playoffs and not even having a chance to even be in it week 16, week 17, to truly appreciate how difficult it is to get there and then take advantage of that opportunity once you're in it.
That's good. I appreciate you guys just sharing that experience. And so clearly that's on the field. So what our job is as a family office is we try to take care of all the other things off the field that your agent and your agency team is not doing. And so I do want to talk about those things. And so Sam, I'll start with you first again. My question for you is, when it comes to compensation, right? You made the playoffs. How does that work?
Well, I alluded to it a little bit earlier. One thing that you may not realize if you're on a losing team is that when you make the playoffs, you get paid to play. So you get checks that other people who are sitting at home don't get. And those checks increase as you continue to play. And Zach will tell you about the Super Bowl. I'm pretty sure the Super Bowl winners get double than what the Super Bowl losers get. He can get, I haven't played, so I don't have the clarity on that. But that was a benefit. All of a sudden, I'm still playing and I'm not thinking, oh, there's extra compensation. Now, no, it won't be the exact same compensation you get as far as your regular NFL salary. This is what we consider somewhat like of a benefit regarding like NFLPA. So everyone's going to get paid the same when it comes to like that salary, but it's an extra check, a bonus check that you don't get if you don't make it.
So we're looking at this year right now. It just began 2025. And so most of these guys have played their games in 2024. And so Zach, my question for you in terms of this money being taxed, is it taxed the year where you played the majority of your games, or this money that you received that Sam talked about being in the playoffs, is it taxed on this current year?
It's on the current year. So for this year, it's going to be 2025 on your taxes. You don't have to worry about any of that. It's going to come to your check like another game check, and it's a different number. Like Sam said, it's significant. The further you go in the playoffs, it can start up to a few $100,000 that you weren't expecting, which is nice. So the takeaway there is like, hey, yes, use some of it for fun. Like when I finally won the Super Bowl, I actually finally bought like the car that I would like dreamed about, got a Mercedes S550, and was like, that was my reward to myself. And that was like, because that was money that I didn't expect to have, that we went out and won that Super Bowl. And then the rest of the rest of those playoff games, save that for that future self. That's a huge takeaway, that when that money is kind of that extra money, if you can save some of that, that pays off down the line.
And one thing to think of as well, Zach, I didn't think about this, but for a player who's thinking about, okay, I'm a free agent and the compensation is the same on two different teams, and maybe taxes, that's something to take into consideration of, okay, maybe the two states have a similar state tax or don't have a state tax. Maybe something to consider, maybe, okay, well, will this team consistently make the playoffs? Because that could be another bonus check that you weren't thinking of. And so I don't want to be specific on teams, but that's just something that I never considered as a player, that looking back, I would think, okay, this may be something to think about. There is an extra check that comes when you play in the playoffs.
I just got to ask this briefly before I get to you, Jeff, is in that check, is it taxed the same in terms of percentage as all other game checks, or is it considered a bonus? Is it taxed differently?
It should be taxed. It's pretty much taxed the same as your salary. So the same withholding is going to come out. It's just like you get to keep playing essentially and get more money. It's not really changed in that regard.
That's super helpful, Zach. I want to just close with the cleanup hitter himself and the professor and Jeff. And that is, we've talked about a lot what players are thinking about on the field and some things that they need to be thinking about off the field. But I mean, gosh, is there anything else we missed that a family office should be taking care of for an NFL player while they're playing in the playoffs for the Super Bowl?
Yeah, so two things come to mind, Rick. It's what your team should be doing, us, and what you should be doing personally. So for us, Zach touched on it on the tax side. Your 2024 tax situation is going to be different than your 2025 tax situation. So your CPA should be helping you go in and change how your withholdings are done with the team now before your first check comes for 2025, or there might be implications down the road with penalties, interest, stuff like that. Right. And then off the field, I call it keeping your circle tight. Right. There's going to be a lot of people coming out of nowhere. You're finally in the playoffs for the first time for some teams in a long time, wanting things from you, wanting these tickets, expecting things. So you got to really decide who's my core group this time of year, because when things go bad, they're going to feel worse than usual. When things go good, everyone's going to be saying you're the best in the world. So keep it tight.
Well, as you guys know, you guys have been listening to our podcast. We love providing resources for you. And the resources we provide for you are free. And a lot of that comes from the questions you guys have. So any questions you have regarding today's episode, or maybe some questions that you had from the previous episode, we'd love to hear from you guys. So please reach out to us at 602-989-5022.